Well, yes, we're talking about economic matters now, and as you've seen there, Professor Oyebanji Oyelaron joins us next. He is the SSA on industrialization to the president of AFDB. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah,
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, so we've seen, we just heard some of the reports about decisions being taken by the central bank, its impact on inflation, interest rates. We've seen the fiscal policies, monetary ones as well. But the thing is, looking through, I mean, you had the presentation recently, and where you spoke about this industrial descent, developmental descent, and how we need to address it. But some of the figures there too are quite depressing, especially when you look through the parts where you spoke about the fact that our income 40 years ago, as a matter of fact, was 6 times that of China. But in 2019, Chinese income has become almost 3.45 times that of Nigeria. That cannot gladden anyone's heart. But the thing is, the authorities here, they've taken, and they keep taking decisions which they say they expect to bring us out of where we are and get us to a better place. But yet, we still are where we are. So talk us through it. What is the missing link? How do we begin to address these kind of challenges?
No, thank you so much. You know, you just mentioned the issue of macroeconomic issues and so forth. But what I spoke to on that day is the long term. We study long-term trends, we study long-term patterns. While the macro issues are extremely important, the emphasis I made on that day is that a nation grows based on deep-going investment in the industrial sector. A nation cannot rely on knee-jerk reactions. A nation has to invest in the long term. So history matters a lot. As you said, 40 years ago, we were like 6 times the income per capita of China. Same thing with close to that of South Korea. In 1967, South Korea overtook Nigeria. We're actually like 50 years behind South Korea. What we export today is what Malaysia was exporting about 30 years ago. Why is that? Because they invested in those things that matter. The real source of growth is at the factory level. The real source of economic prosperity is those things that you process, you manufacture, and then you sell to people. And in the process of doing that, you learn, you accumulate technological capabilities, you learn, you build up your scientific and technological base of those countries. We have done exactly the opposite. Look at the labs. We were in the University of Ife in the 70s, late 70s, 80s. The kind of labs we had. Within even the federal structure, the kind of scientific labs that we had, all are gone. You know, when COVID struck, a company called Pfizer reacted almost immediately and came up with the mRNA vaccine. As we speak, this year, only 16% of Africans have been vaccinated. And when you go to Europe, almost 80%, 90% have been vaccinated because they had that technological capability to respond to crises that destroyed economies. And why was Pfizer able to react? Because it's a company that was an obscure company 174 years ago. And it kept on building on those capabilities over time. And therefore, it had the arsenal, all the equipments, all the manpower, all the skills, knowledge base to react quickly when crisis came. This is the problem we have. We get to a point when COVID struck, we couldn't react. We were helpless, we were begging. We were mourning and talking about vaccine nationalism, you know, which is true. I mean, you have all this so-called global collaboration simply broke down because countries prioritize their own nationals. So that was the issue I took up on that day at this meeting. And a number of, they actually invited a number of young youth service engineers there. 3 of them were crying. I gave them the example, that when President Jonathan was there, he commissioned a study on abandoned projects, and it was found that close to over 1,000-something projects in Nigeria were abandoned. Not because we didn't have the technical capability, but basically because of our way of doing things. All of them were, and they cited again that albatross on our hand, the Ajakuta was cited among that. The original cost of that project was $650 million. By the time we finished, it was $5 billion, and it never operated. It never even got completed. And I contrasted that with the Pohang State Plant in South Korea. We started 2 years apart. And today, Pohang State Plant exports $60 billion of steel every year, employs 65,000 people directly. When you look at the nature of that kind of industry, for every one person you employ in a steel plant, you employ 15 people downstream. So close to 1 million people will have been employed downstream. I mean, high-skilled labor.
Well, Prof.
So those I spoke to on that day.
Right. I'll need to come in now, Prof. I mean, when you talk about industrialization, factories, I couldn't help but think about the fact that, bread bakers, manufacturers are going on strike. It goes all the way. It's not just bread, but I mean, bread is a big deal, and I can go on and on, different, industries and all of that. But you particularly said we need to invest in factories. You gave the example of Pfizer. And I know Pfizer is not government owned. It was started by 2 German immigrants in New York about 173 years ago. So how should we invest in factories in the Nigerian context? Is it as a private sector? Are you talking about government? What exactly do you mean? I know this is long term, but it's never too late to get these ideas and work on them. So what exactly do you mean investing in factories? Who should be doing that?
So the role of government is very clear. The role of government is to be the enabler, the insurer of innovative activities. By the way, we started this long time ago. There was a time, right, when we had Dunlop, when we had Michelin. There was a time when we had Leyland, when we had Pan, when we had Volkswagen. There was a time in Nigeria when we had Okitikupa, oil palm. There was a time that we had sawmills, very sophisticated companies. There was a time. So what happened was what you call deindustrialization. It's not that we never did it. We just never sustained it. So investing in factories means that you need to sustain those things. The countries we all look up today, and I'm sorry to say, I keep saying it, that for me, it's lost opportunities. In fact, I spoke a lot about lost opportunities, and we can quantify them. It will break your heart, when you really put figures to those things, that we are not focused. We don't have long-term vision of society. We don't have leadership that can conceptualize, and the elite to agree. The elite must agree that people need to be served. This is really, so it wasn't that we didn't start, we started it. We started investing in factories. We started investing in all across. I was with the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research for 10 years, and we used to go all around this country to Basita Sugar, Savannah Sugar. We used to go all over the place. Yes, of course, they were not, optimal. But there were factories. Kaduna Superphosphate, Nigerian Textiles employed over 1 million people up until 80s, right? We had Arewa, we had in Kaduna, we had in Kano. Those were actually commercial centers. It wasn't limited to just one area of our country. It's everywhere. So but we took our eyes off the ball because short-term gains. What oil and all these minerals resources do to you is that you take your eyes off the ball. Short-termism, cheap money, and then it breeds corruption. And then it solidifies institutions that promote those kinds of corruption. People just sit down and then they just, think, tomorrow oil will go to $100. Right now, oil has gone to 100 and plus. We are not reaping it. You see what is happening today? In 2020, Nigeria exported goods worth under $30 billion from the oil industry. We imported $72 billion. Look at the balance of payment in that sector alone. So this is what lack of investment in that, what I call deep-going, long-term, sustainable sector of industries, building of factories. The factory is the center of creativity. The factory is where money is made, where people make money.
Well,
this is
Prof,
why.
Looking at the state of the economy, the interest rates raised by the CBN just after the announcement by the NBS of the new inflation rate. But the CBN has bitten the bullet as expected, and in justifying the decision, according to that report, they said that development financing is a palliative, and they're releasing credits to the agricultural sector and to the health sector. But if we look at the trajectory, particularly since 2014, that the Apex Bank has invested in the Anchor Borrower Scheme and the Commercial Agriculture Credit Scheme, where are the gains really, from development financing? If we look at the food inflation rate, which is as high as 22%.
No, thank you very much. This goes to the heart of the issue. We have to, and one has to commend the president of Nigeria and all those who put agriculture forward. And I'm not talking of small-scale agriculture, I'm putting as a priority. But how have we implemented it? This is the core of the issue. I am not in the government, I don't have the figures, but the point is that when you look at the state of agriculture today, you wonder yourself, where did all the money go to? What we speak about, there are two sides to it. There's the on-farm and the off-farm sector. Where the real gains are is where industry intervenes. You produce, for example, you produce cassava, you produce all of those things. Now, off the farm is really where the issue lies. Who process cassava? We have remained an agrarian society where people are using charcoal and whatever it is in the villages to process cassava. But when you take cassava to China or somewhere else, they are put in giant factories where it is turned to industrial starch, it's turned to methanol and high-value products. When you take cocoa, for example, say yesterday I had a conversation with one of those who are really heavily involved. A ton of cocoa bean is is about $2,000. You just semi-process it to cocoa butter, it goes $7,000. By the time you get to a ton of chocolate, it's about $15,000. So look at the multiplier effect by simply putting together some columns of factory and then adding value to that cocoa bean that you harvest. The same thing across every of the, same thing with cashew. So fine, we hear about this thing. We've made some gains with rice, for example. In Nigeria, we moved to the top in Africa. But in terms of the gains of industrial opportunity that we have, we still haven't got there. This is the problem. So,
Prof, you have made a significant point there, saying that the real deal is in industrialization. And, some of the partakers in the industry will say that the off-takers are not readily available because of the volume of the raw material that they require that is not enough. And that brings to mind the president's comment in a very recent interview with Channels Television, where he says only 2.5% of arable land are tapped in agriculture. So has the administration missed it, by not investing as massively as it should in agriculture?
Yeah, of course, Nigeria has missed it. It's not just, right from the beginning of time. In 1950, 1960, Nigeria was a global leader in oil palm, for example. We produced 43% of all global oil palm. Today, 2%. 43% in 1960. Today, 2%. We were right ahead. Today, only Malaysia and Indonesia cultivate 80%. And of course, they dominate the global. So, we have missed it. Today, we plant 600,000 hectares of oil palm. Malaysia, 6 billion. So we are 10%. Same thing with Indonesia. Today, Indonesia cultivates about 14 million hectares of oil palm. So the idea that the raw materials are not enough is a chicken and egg issue. Then cultivate more, incentivize people to cultivate, because farmers will not do it if they don't have offtake. 200 million people we have, and we are even within this country alone, because we still import all of this. So there is something missing in the value chain. We need to fix that value chain. It's become a cliche, right? People just say, oh, value chain, value chain. But in practical terms, we have not been successful in actually dealing with the issue. So this is the point that we are making. I think we should stop giving excuses to ourselves. 60 years of lost opportunities and failure.
All right, Prof. So in conclusion, while you spoke about the challenges with industrialization, you also identified what caused it and what are the key considerations for us to factor in order to begin to move forward. And you spoke about knowledge, both scientific and technological knowledge. So if we were to focus on that, do you have any figure to say if we put in this amount of money in this amount of years, we should be able to make meaningful impacts? Could you tell us about that?
No, thank you. I mean, the point is, I always have a problem with people just talking about money. We want to see outcome, right? You know, you and I have that frustration in our country. Oh, so and so have released 80 billion to this. Nobody knows where the money goes. Nobody comes to account to you and say, because of this money, we built 10 factories for cassava. We built 20 this for this. So yes, so one can put tentative figures, but I just gave you some figures earlier. We are 50 years plus behind South Korea. So there is the basis of all of that is education, secondary, primary, university, laboratories that don't exist anymore, reagents that people cannot find. This is a blessed country. There's no amount of thing that we can do now. Proper public finance management is key to what we need to do from now. You know, we can throw up all the figures, but how is it managed? Where is it? Where's the leakages? How come it doesn't show up in outcomes? And those are the things we need to deal with. In that paper, I gave an example when Park Chung-hee, the general who built Korea, basically who was actually the architect of modern Korea, you know, every Monday he had a meeting with the team that was building their Pohang steel plant. Every Monday. In fact, there's a whole book that was written on it, and it says, if you want to look for, in a regression analysis, if you want to look for the factor of who built Korea, Park Chung-hee will be the matter. But if you want to see who actually made sure that that country become a modern industrial society, he said, Park is the only factor. Leadership.
All right.
Leadership. That is the key, leadership and governance.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Oyebanji Oyelaran, who is the Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President of AFDB. Always a pleasure to have you on, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.